On my desk right now is a letter. It's been sitting there for 11 days. I keep meaning to file it away with the others, but every morning I come into my study, pour my coffee, sit down in that old leather chair, and there it is, still on top of the pile. 3 pages, handwritten, blue ink, from a man in Cedar Grove, Pennsylvania, named Robert. He's 68 years old, retired postal worker, and he wrote me because he says he's been carrying something inside him for 41 years that he never told another living soul, not his wife, not his pastor, not his children. And the thing he's been carrying is anger, just anger, that's it. He says in the letter, and I'll quote him here because the words have stuck with me. He says, "Father Anthony, I'm afraid I'm going to die with this anger inside me, and I'm more afraid of that than I am of dying itself. Now I want you to sit with that for a moment." A grown man, a grandfather, a churchgoer his whole life, and the thing that scares him most about meeting his maker isn't the cancer he's been treated for twice. It isn't the heart trouble. It's the anger he's been carrying since 1983. In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to tell you the 7 words that ended 16 years of silence between 2 sisters, the mistake that almost cost me my own brother forever, and the one prayer a Vietnam veteran whispered on his back porch that finally let him come home to his wife after 50 years of silence. Stay with me. This is going to matter. My name is Father Anthony, and I've been a pastor in this country for going on 40 years now. I started in a little parish in Ohio, came back east, and these last 15 years I've served a small congregation just outside Bridgewater. In all those years, I've sat across from more broken people than I can count. I've buried more folks than I care to remember. I've heard confessions in hospital rooms at 3 in the morning. I've watched marriages end in funeral homes, and I've watched marriages begin again at gravesides. And if you ask me, after all these years, what is the sin that does the most damage? The sin that destroys the most lives? The sin that I have seen ruin more families and more souls than any other? I wouldn't tell you it's the ones the preachers shout about on Sunday morning. I wouldn't tell you it's lust, or greed, or pride, though those will hurt you too. I would tell you it's anger, plain, slow, simmering anger. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't break dishes, the kind that just sits in a man's chest or a woman's chest, year after year, eating away at the soul like rust eats away at iron. And here's what nobody tells you about anger. Here's what most pastors won't say from the pulpit, because it sounds too harsh or too simple, or because they themselves are carrying anger they don't want to look at. Anger isn't an emotion. Not really. Not the kind I'm talking about. The flash of frustration when someone cuts you off in traffic, that's an emotion. That comes and goes. That's not what's killing you. What's killing you is the anger you decided to keep. The anger you nursed. The anger you fed every night before bed by going over the story in your head one more time, of what they did to you, of what was taken from you, of how unfair it was. That isn't an emotion anymore. That's a choice. And the longer you make it, the harder it becomes to make any other choice. Scripture tells us in Ephesians chapter 4, "Be ye angry, and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." I've come to believe the second half of that verse is one of the most important sentences in the entire Bible. Don't let the sun go down on it. And I'm going to tell you about a woman who let 16,000 sunsets pass with her anger. 16,000. And what it cost her, almost cost her everything she had left. Now let me tell you about a woman named Linda. Linda came to see me about 9 years ago. She was 54 years old at the time, worked as a hospice nurse over in Millersville, had been doing it for 20-some years. If you've ever met a hospice nurse, you know they're a particular kind of person. They've seen things most of us can't imagine. They sit with the dying. They hold hands when families can't bring themselves to. Linda was that kind of woman. Strong, practical, the kind who would show up at your house with a casserole the day after a funeral without being asked. But when she walked into my office that Tuesday afternoon, she didn't look strong. She looked like she hadn't slept in a month. She sat down across from me and she said, "Father, I think there's something wrong with me. I think I'm becoming someone I don't recognize." And then she started to cry. Not the kind of crying you do at a funeral. The kind of crying that comes from a place way down deep. The kind that's been waiting years to get out. She told me about her sister, her younger sister, Patricia. They had grown up together in a little house in eastern Pennsylvania. 2 girls, 2 years apart. The kind of sisters who shared a bedroom until they were teenagers. Linda said when their mother died of cancer back in 2007, she was the one who took care of everything. She was the one who sat at the bedside in those final weeks. She was the one who read the Psalms out loud at 3 in the morning when their mother couldn't sleep. And Patricia, the younger sister, was busy. Patricia had a job. Patricia had kids. Patricia would come visit on weekends sometimes, bring flowers, stay an hour, and leave. After their mother died, when it came time to settle the estate, Patricia showed up with a lawyer and a list of things she wanted from the house. Furniture their mother had promised to Linda, jewelry, the piano, and Linda, exhausted, broken, grieving, just let her have it. She didn't fight, she didn't say a word, but she didn't forget. That's the thing, she didn't forget. And for the next 16 years, Linda carried that around. Every Christmas card from Patricia, she'd open it and feel that little burn in her chest. Every family gathering, she'd sit across from her sister and smile and pass the mashed potatoes, and inside, she'd be screaming. She told me, "Father, I haven't had a real conversation with my sister in 16 years. And then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "And the worst part is, I think I don't even know why I'm angry anymore. I think I just got used to being angry. I think the anger has become who I am." Right there, I knew exactly what was happening. The anger had stopped being about Patricia. The anger had stopped being about the piano or the furniture. The anger had become a tenant in Linda's heart. It had moved in. It had hung pictures on the wall, and now Linda didn't know how to evict it because she didn't know who she was without it. I asked her, "Linda, when was the last time you were genuinely happy? Not okay, not fine, but genuinely, deeply, joyfully happy?" She sat there for a long time. The clock on my wall ticked, and finally she said, "I don't know, Father. Maybe before Mom got sick." 16 years. 16 years she had not been happy, and she didn't even know it until that moment. That's what anger does. It steals years. It steals decades. It steals the person you were supposed to become. We sat together that afternoon for almost 2 hours. We didn't fix anything that day. You don't fix 16 years of resentment in 2 hours. But we started. We started by just naming it out loud. I want to be careful here. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm a pastor. What I share with you today is a spiritual perspective, and if you're carrying something heavy that's affecting your relationships or your health, please reach out to a counselor or your family doctor. Faith and professional help walk together, not apart. But what Linda did 3 months later, I've never seen anyone do quite the same way, and it changed everything. About 3 months after our first conversation, Linda called me. She said, "Father, I'm driving to Patricia's house. I don't know what I'm going to say. I don't know if she'll even open the door, but I'm driving there." Patricia lived about 2 hours away, in a little suburb outside Philadelphia. Linda told me later she cried the whole drive. She had to pull over 3 times. She almost turned around twice, but she kept going. And when she pulled into her sister's driveway, Patricia was out front, putting groceries in the car. Linda said Patricia looked at her, and her face just crumbled. And before Linda could say a word, Patricia said 7 words. 7 words that ended 16 years of silence. She said, "Linda, I have been waiting 16 years. Now think about that for a minute. 2 sisters, 2 women who had shared a bedroom, who had buried their mother together. 16 years of cold shoulders at Thanksgiving. And the whole time, Patricia had been waiting too. Patricia had her own version of the story. Patricia had her own anger, her own hurt, her own sense that Linda had pushed her out, that Linda had taken over the dying, that Linda had made her feel like a bad daughter. They sat in Patricia's kitchen for 6 hours. They drank coffee that went cold. They cried. They yelled, they apologized. They didn't agree on everything, even at the end, but they hugged each other before Linda left. And on the drive home, Linda told me, she rolled down the window and let the wind blow on her face. And for the first time in 16 years, she felt something she had forgotten existed. She felt light. She felt, in her own words, like somebody had cut a rope that had been tied around my chest for half my life. Listen to me. If you're watching this, and you've got somebody in your life that you haven't spoken to in years, and the reason is something that, if you're honest with yourself, you can't even fully remember anymore, the anger isn't protecting you. It's not. I know it feels like it is. I know it feels like the anger is holding the line, defending your dignity, making sure they don't get away with it. But the only person it's keeping prisoner is you. They're out there living their lives. You're the one paying the rent on a feeling that was supposed to be temporary. Now, while we're here, if this conversation is meaning something to you, do me one favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Not because I need it, because there are folks out there carrying the same anger you are, and your one click helps them find this conversation too. And if you feel led, type one name in the comments, just a first name of someone you've been holding anger toward. We'll pray for them. We'll pray for you. Now let me get back to it, because the next man I'll tell you about didn't see his grandchildren for 22 years, and what he did in his last 4, I still can't talk about without crying. Let me tell you about a fellow named James. He was a mechanic, ran his own little shop out in a small town in Texas, near where I served back in the late 90s. James was, on the outside, the friendliest man you'd ever meet. Big handshake, loud laugh, always had a joke, the kind of guy you'd want to have a beer with on the front porch. But James had a son named David. And David, when he was about 19, told his father he didn't want to take over the shop. David wanted to go to college. He wanted to study music. He wanted to be a teacher. And James had spent his whole life building that shop so he could hand it to his boy. When David told him no, something in James went cold. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He just got quiet. And that quiet lasted 22 years. 22 years. David moved away, got married, had 2 kids. James never met those grandchildren. Not once. They lived 8 hours away. Plenty of time to drive. Plenty of time to pick up a phone. But James was angry, and the anger had calcified. It had turned to bone. By the time James came to me, he was 63 years old. He'd had a heart attack. The doctor told him he probably had 2-3 years left at the most if he didn't change everything. He sat across from me in the same chair Linda had sat in, and he said, "Father, I think I made a mistake. I think I made a really bad mistake, and I don't know if it's too late." I told him what I'm going to tell you now. It is almost never too late. As long as there's breath in your body and breath in theirs, there's a road back. I've seen reconciliations on deathbeds. I've seen fathers and sons embrace each other for the first time in decades when one of them was hours from leaving this world. The road back is hard. The road back requires you to put down the story you've been telling yourself for years about who was right and who was wrong. James called his son that night from my office. He used my phone. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely dial. And David picked up. And James said, "Son, it's your dad. I'm sorry. I've been a fool for a long time. Can I come see you? Can I meet my grandkids?" He drove out there the next weekend. He met his grandchildren. They were 17 and 15 by then, almost grown. He had missed all of it. The first steps, the first day of school, the Little League games, all of it gone and never coming back. But he had whatever was left, and he made the most of it. He died about 4 years later, lasted longer than the doctor said he would, and at his funeral, his son David got up and spoke, and what he said, I'll never forget. He said, "My dad and I lost 22 years, but we got 4, and those 4 were the best 4 of his life, and the best 4 of mine. Anger had stolen 22, forgiveness gave him 4. That's the brutal, simple math of anger. It takes more than it gives. It always takes more than it gives." And I want to stop right here, because I have to be honest with you about something. I almost left this part out of tonight's conversation. I rewrote it 3 times, because if I'm going to ask you to look at your anger, the least I can do is look at mine. About 15 years ago, I had a brother, and I hadn't spoken to him in 7 years. 7 years. A pastor, a man who stood in front of a congregation every Sunday and preached about forgiveness. Standing here right now, I have to tell you what happened, because it's the reason I'm able to sit here at all. I don't even need to tell you what the falling out was about, because to be perfectly honest, I'm not sure I could explain it in a way that would make sense. It had something to do with our father's estate, something to do with words said at a Christmas dinner, something to do with the way he had treated my wife at our wedding 20 years before. The truth is, it was 1,000 little things that piled up into one big thing, and we stopped talking. For 7 years. And I'll tell you, I justified it. I had all kinds of reasons. He was the one who started it. He never apologized. He's the one who needs to make the first move. I was protecting my family, on and on. Every story we tell ourselves about why our anger is righteous, I told it. And I believed every word of it. Until one Sunday, I was preaching on the parable of the unforgiving servant, the one in Matthew chapter 18, where Jesus tells of a man who was forgiven a great debt and then went out and wouldn't forgive a small debt owed to him. And I was preaching, and I heard my own voice saying the words, and I stopped. Right there in front of the whole congregation, I just stopped, and I stood there for what felt like an eternity. And finally I said, "Folks, I have to be honest with you. The man I'm preaching about right now is me. I have a brother I haven't spoken to in 7 years, and I am the unforgiving servant in this story, and I am going to call him this afternoon." And I did. It was the hardest phone call I ever made. He answered on the 3rd ring. I said, "It's your brother. I've been an idiot. I love you. Can we talk?" And he was quiet for a long time. So long I thought maybe the line had gone dead. And then I heard him take a deep breath, and he said, "I've been waiting for that phone call for 7 years. I didn't know how to make it myself." We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. We cried, both of us, 2 grown men in our 60s, crying on the phone like little boys. We didn't fix everything. There were still things we disagreed on. There still are. But we started talking again. We started seeing each other at holidays again. He came to my church one Sunday and sat in the 3rd row, and afterward he hugged me and said, "Little brother, I'm proud of you." So when I sit here and tell you that anger steals, I'm not preaching from a pulpit looking down. I'm a man who knows. I'm a man who paid the price. And the worst part is, I'm not the only one in my own family who lost decades to silence. My grandfather did the same thing. So did his father. Anger had been a family heirloom for 3 generations, and I almost passed it down to my own son. Almost. There's a story in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, where Jesus says something that has always stopped me cold. He says, "Therefore if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift." Think about what he's saying. Don't even bother bringing your offering to God if you've got something unresolved with another person. Stop. Walk out of the temple. Go fix it. Then come back. That's how seriously the Lord takes the matter of human anger. Not as a side issue, as a precondition, as something that comes before worship itself. Now I want to talk about something I think is the most dangerous form of anger of all. And it's the anger nobody wants to admit they have. It's anger at God. If you've ever been angry at God, you are not alone. You are not a bad Christian. The Psalms are full of people screaming at God. King David, the man after God's own heart, wrote whole songs that are basically him hollering at the Almighty, asking why. Job did it. Jeremiah did it. Even our Lord Jesus on the cross cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" If the Son of God can ask why, you can ask why. The question is not whether you'll feel that anger when life cuts you in half. The question is what you do with it. I think of a woman named Mary. She lost her son. He was 26 years old. He was a firefighter in a city in Ohio, and he died in the line of duty. doing what he loved, saving people he didn't know. And Mary, who had been a faithful churchgoer her entire life, who had taught Sunday school for 34 years, stopped going to church the day she buried him. She didn't tell anybody she was angry at God. Good Christian women don't say that out loud. But she was. She was furious. She told me when she finally came to see me almost 2 years later, "Father, every time I tried to pray, I just felt this rage. So I stopped praying. I figured God didn't want to hear from me anyway." And I told her, "Mary, listen to me. The God I know would rather hear you screaming at him than hear nothing at all. Silence is the death of relationship. Anger is at least a conversation." We talked a long time, Mary and I, about her boy, about his laugh, about the way he used to come over Sunday afternoons and eat half her refrigerator, about the day the chaplain showed up at her door with the news, about the flag they handed her at the cemetery, folded into that perfect triangle. And I told her, "Mary, you don't have to forgive God. God doesn't need your forgiveness, but you might need to be honest with him. Walk into that empty church on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody else is there. Sit down in a back pew and tell him exactly what you think. He can take it. He's bigger than your anger." And she did. She told me later she sat in that empty sanctuary for almost 3 hours one Tuesday in late autumn. She cried, she yelled, she told God he had a lot to answer for, and then she got quiet. And in the quiet, she said something shifted. She didn't get an answer to her question. She still doesn't have an answer. But she got, in her words, the sense that I wasn't alone in the room. And that was enough. That was enough to start coming back. If you're listening to this, and you've been angry at God for a long time, please, hear me. He's not going anywhere. He's not offended. He's not waiting for you to come crawling back. He's the father in the parable of the prodigal son, who's standing at the edge of the road every single day, scanning the horizon, waiting for you to come home. And when you do, he's going to come running, not walking, running. That's the God I've come to know after 40 years of ministry. The God who said in Revelation, "He shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain." That's the God who is waiting for you, and he is not afraid of your anger. But there's one kind of anger I haven't talked about yet, the kind that doesn't yell at sisters or sons or even God. The kind that goes silent for 50 years and almost takes a marriage with it.